No anime production can maintain maximum effort the whole way through its run. Well, unless it's free run. So how do you set the bar for quality in a way that makes even the less important episodes feel consistent and exciting? Led by Akira Furukawa, who both directed and did storyboards, Dungeon Meshi Episode 9 puts the most emphasis on the few most important elements to make the episode still shine, even without the big, flashy, standout Sakuga moments that have defined the last few episodes. So as always, let's break it down and compare it a little bit to the manga to see how the adaptation works. Pay extra close attention to the way they animate water and blood in this episode. We start with this scene where the party is finally reunited with former member Namari. This is another sequence that plays it safe and follows the manga panels very closely. There isn't a whole lot about the animation to analyze here, so let me wet your whistle with a little bit of good old-fashioned nitpicking. I know that's why you're all here. This panel makes it pretty clear that Namari's vision is blocked, so she can't see Laios when he starts talking. In the anime, he's like 20 feet away and she's looking right at him when she says, "I know that voice," which implies that she either has face blindness or a visual impairment of some kind. A quick note for the English dub, Namari is played by a non-binary voice actor, and I think the voice fits her character really well. This series plays with androgyny a lot, with certain fantasy races leaning one way or another in terms of gendered traits, so it's cool to see that shown through the voices as well. Just wait till these f***ers show up.
And those two are Kaka and Kiki.
Kaka and Kiki. Laios looks a little strange in these two cuts, with a weirdly pointy nose and a face that's almost in complete profile, while the back of his head is at more of a 3/4 angle. These cuts probably could have used a bit more correction, but generally, it's a great interpretation of this tiny panel from the manga. The character acting, combined with this quick pan over to Senshi following Laios' gaze, and the playful music score that punctuates his realization before leaving him in silence when he unsuccessfully offers Kelpie meat, make for a great comedic scene. This added point of view shot of Namari looking at Marcel, as well as this subtle change in her expression, makes her conflicting emotions more clear than this single expression, and it's really nice to finally have her back in the party. She adds a certain balance to the dynamics of the... Never mind. That nice animation sauce is back with this brutal cut by Izumi Iwafuchi. The violence has been slowly ramping up over the past few episodes and showing that this dungeon isn't just a backdrop for fun adventures or just a harmonious ecosystem. It can also be an unforgiving, creepy, and violent place in ways that only continue to become more clear the deeper the characters delve. And the sudden brutality of this cut is meant to catch you off guard and contrast sharply with Mr. Tansu's nonchalant and jaded attitude. And that contrast continues later through the reactions from Laios and Mr. Tansu. While the narrative initially presents the character's indifference towards death uncritically, the more we learn about how the dungeon works, the more it becomes clear that, as Senshi says, that's not normal, Laios. The dungeon evades simplistic interpretation as either a nice balanced ecosystem or an unnatural aberration. The truth is a combination of both. Jumping back here, this double helix effect is a simple but still impressive looking way to re-establish the threat of the Undine, and it's a little unfortunate that they decided to go with this simple side view run cycle for what in the manga was this dynamic full page spread, with the added comedy of Namari's corpse being dragged face down along the ground. Though I guess they did it because they already did this shot last episode, so it would have felt repetitive, and it makes sense to use it as the climactic moment with the main cast instead of here. We finally get to see how resurrection works, and it's starting to become clear that the standout aspect of this episode is the liquid and effects animation. Namari's blood could have just slurped back into her wounds straightforwardly like it does with Marcel later in the episode, but it instead lifts into the air and forms these droplets which cast shadows on the skin below. And this swirling motion, which eases out and speeds up as it goes, mimics the look of water circling the drain in a sink or bathtub. And I wonder if whoever did this cut used that as reference footage, or if it's just something in their visual library in their brain. Fluid animations like this are more freeform, and I would imagine take a bit less time and effort compared to animating a full character at the same level of quality, but this really brings a sense of production value to a shot that's otherwise just a still image. This shot is very similar to the manga panel, except they gave him some more, meat on his bones. This shot by Atsushi Yoneda is a cool example of a sort of counterintuitive aspect of perspective. The camera tilts upward, and as we reach Kiki's head, where it was initially looking straight on, it's now a low angle shot, meaning that everything needs to be foreshortened. That means that this whole keyframe needs to be all warped and fisheye-y. It's too bad they didn't use the feet in the final shot, because that's where the effect is most obvious. In the final shot, it doesn't feel like the figure is all distorted, it just feels like the camera is tilting upward. It looks just like how if you take a panorama with your phone and scroll across it, it looks like you're just rotating within the environment, but if you zoom out, it suddenly looks like you've created this weird, bizarro world where the Earth has been horrifically projected onto the surface of a sphere or something. And if we flatten out the keyframe and slide upwards across it, it ends up feeling like the camera is craning upward instead of tilting, which gives a different vibe to the motion. This fisheye effect is very often necessary for background art, if, for example, the camera is panning across a scene, but it's cool to see it done with a character, too. Atsushi Yoneda continues to do the rest of this final sequence, and it's becoming clear that he seems to be the production's go-to tentacle guy, because you may remember he also did this bit near the beginning. I wonder if he'll end up doing this scene, too. This is the first time we've seen Senshi without his helmet, right? I love that he suddenly gets eyebrows and a more detailed face once he takes it off, with these little lines around his eyes and a more realistic nose shape. These are some great arm movements from Laios as he waits to be grabbed by the tentacles, as if he's a little kid waiting to be picked up by a parent. This shot shows how well you can create a sense of depth through lighting with just 3 simple shades of brown, and it also shows a great sense of physics with Laios swinging his legs here to try to wiggle free. I like the choice to cover Kiki's face here with Mr. Tansu's hand instead of showing it, because it strengthens the reveal of Laios' face a few seconds later if you don't already have an idea of what it's going to look like. Covering his face with a speech bubble is a funny trick that they can't pull off in the anime, so instead they frame this shot at Chilchuck's height so Laios' head is out of the frame, which is also pretty good. This joke is present in the manga, where this panel is formatted like one of the usual recipe pages, but it's just Senshi staring at this thing with his hands still inflated like a balloon, but it's made even funnier in the anime because they treat it just like their version of the food glamour shots, which means the glossy, painterly look with extra levels of shading and highlights, which makes Senshi look like he's been basted and roasted on a spit to perfection. Really hard to look at. Great job, fellas. Oh, thank God he's back to normal. Poor Laios, always being misunderstood. Man, Senshi doesn't even play a very major role in this episode, and he's still stealing the show. The anime skips over some dialogue here where Mr. Tansu considers getting a new warrior to replace Namari, but I think this look on his face is more than enough to get the point across and allows a little more time for the more important aspects of the episode. Last time I said that I kinda wished Ichigo Kano and Kai Ikarashi gave us some reflections in the surface of the Undine, and it's as if they heard me because this time Trigger delivered. This reflection of Laios holding the cooking pot is a great way to bring some more visual interest to this cut of the Undine preparing to attack, a shot that we've already seen a handful of times at this point. And again, when Namari takes over and charges at the Undine, this reflection gets more and more detailed the closer she, and by extension we, get to the surface of the water. This climactic moment consists mostly of still images, but just like the resurrection scene from earlier, little details like the way this drop of sweat drips past the camera and sizzles away on the surface of the lid, and the red glow that slowly appears on the two dwarves' hands not only communicate the temperature of the pot, but combined with the musical crescendo, they bring a sense of excitement to these otherwise rudimentary shots. This is such a nice cut of Marcel scooping water into a mug. It's animated on 2s instead of 3s like most of the rest of the episode, which is just enough to make it feel really smooth and fluid. Marcel does end up getting her own cooking montage, kind of like the one that I complained that they had removed from episode 7, which gives one more example of the emphasis on water and fluid animations in this episode, with this beautiful cut of Marcel's reflection in the water. And again, they use the food illustration format of the show to add an extra expressionistic flair that wasn't there in the manga by illustrating Namari's bowl of stew twice, once with dull, muted colors, and once with much more vibrant colors and that characteristic crisp shine and bloom effect, to show her perceptions before and after tasting the dish. That's a really nice touch. This episode was more of a safe, simple reproduction of the manga than the past few, which relied heavily on the unique creative style of particular animators, but still managed to smartly bring its own flair and creative touches in the places where it mattered the most, to not show any noticeable dip in quality as we lead up to the big mid-season set piece. It's actually astonishing how consistently high the bar for quality is as we get further into the show, for even the episodes like this one where the team is clearly conserving some creative energy, and a lot of that comes down to the smart choices about which moments and elements are most important to allocate resources to. In this case, the fluid animations brought a sense of identity and quality to what otherwise was a relatively simple episode. If you like watching big, hungry himbos bumble their way hilariously through brutal and unforgiving worlds while being surrounded by a cast of colorful and mostly also slightly insane characters, then I think you'll also really like this video which I just made, which is a deep dive into the world of Dorohedoro, which is finally getting a second season. I worked real hard on it, so go watch it, or else I'll report you to the IRS for tax evasion. Feel free to subscribe if you want to catch the next one of these videos, and I'll see you next time.